whilst in the sphere of pure toxicology he had, and has, no rival. The Borgias were children by comparison. But look where I would, think how I might, no adequate explanation of this latest outrage seemed possible along normal lines. "There's the clue," said Nayland Smith, pointing to a little ash tray upon the table near by. "Follow it if you can." But I could not. "As I have explained," continued my friend, "I was awakened by a sound of coughing. Then came a death grip upon my throat, and instinctively my hand shot out in search of my attacker. I could not reach him; my hands came in contact with nothing palpable. Therefore I clutched at the fingers which were dug into my windpipe, and found them to be small, as the marks show, and hairy. I managed to give that first cry for help; then with all my strength I tried to unfasten the grip that was throttling the life out of me. At last I contrived to move one of the hands, and I called out again, though not so loudly. Then both the hands were back again. I was weakening, but I clawed like a madman at the thin, hairy arms of the strangling thing, and with a blood red mist dancing before my eyes, I seemed to be whirling madly round and round until all became a blank. Evidently I used my nails pretty freely, and here's the trophy." For the 20th time, I should think, I carried the ash tray in my hand and laid it immediately under the table lamp in order to examine its contents. In the little brass bowl lay a blood-stained fragment of grayish hair attached to a tatter of skin. This fragment of epidermis had an oddly bluish tinge, and the attached hair was much darker at the roots than elsewhere. Saving its singular color, it might have been torn from the forearm of a very hirsute human; but although my thoughts wandered unfettered, north, south, east and west, although, knowing the resources of Fu-Manchu, I considered all the recognized Mongolian types, and in quest of hirsute mankind, even roamed far north among the blubbering Esquimaux, although I glanced at Australasia, at Central Africa, and passed in mental review the dark places of the Congo, nowhere in the known world, nowhere in the history of the human species, could I come upon a type of man answering to the description suggested by our strange clue. Nayland Smith was watching me curiously as I bent over the little brass ash tray. "You are puzzled," he rapped in his short way. "So I am, utterly puzzled. Fu Manchu's gallery of monstrosities clearly has become reinforced, for even if we identified the type, we should not be in sight of our explanation." "You mean..." I began. "Fully 4 feet from the window, Petrie, and that window but a few inches open. Look!" He bent forward, resting his chest against the table, and stretched out his hand toward me. "You have a rule there; just measure." Setting down the ash tray, I opened out the rule and measured the distance from the further edge of the table to the tips of Smith's fingers. "28 inches, and I have a long reach," snapped Smith, withdrawing his arm and striking a match to relight his pipe. "There's one thing, Petrie, often proposed before, which now we must do without delay. The ivy must be stripped from the walls at the back. It's a pity, but we cannot afford to sacrifice our lives to our sense of the aesthetic. What do you make of the sound like a cracking of a whip?" "I make nothing of it, Smith," I replied wearily. "It might have been a thick branch of ivy breaking beneath the weight of a climber." "Did it sound like it?" "I must confess that the explanation does not convince me, but I have no better one." Smith, permitting his pipe to go out, sat staring straight before him and tugging at the lobe of his left ear. "The old bewilderment is seizing me," I continued. "At first, when I realized that Dr. Fu Manchu was back in England, when I realized that an elaborate murder machine was set up somewhere in London, it seemed unreal, fantastical. Then I met Karamaneh. She, whom we thought to be his victim, showed herself again to be his slave. Now, with Weymouth and Scotland Yard at work, the old secret evil is established again in our midst. Unaccountably, our lives are menaced. Sleep is a danger. Every shadow threatens death. Oh, it is awful!" Smith remained silent. He did not seem to have heard my words. I knew these moods, and had learned that it was useless to seek to interrupt them. With his brows drawn down, and his deep set eyes staring into space, he sat there gripping his cold pipe so tightly that my own jaw muscles ached sympathetically. No man was better equipped than this gaunt British Commissioner to stand between society and the menace of the Yellow Doctor. I respected his meditations, for, unlike my own, they were informed by the intimate knowledge of the dark and secret things of the East, of that mysterious East out of which Fu-Manchu came, of that jungle of noxious things whose miasma had been wafted westward with the implacable Chinaman. I walked quietly from the door, occupied with my own bitter reflections. CHAPTER 15 Elaine Tweddle, Stirling, Ontario